Millennials, pretty much the most awesome generation of all time. We strive to work 40 hours a week. We want $80,000 a year. We don't want to work nights or weekends. It's such a big deal. It's so crazy, huh? That's the theory and that's what people tell me as I travel around, that we're just lazy. We constantly have our faces in our phone. We do, but so do y'all. I've watched y'all today. Another thing that I hear is the crop coming out of mortuary school is terrible. They all have the beards. They all have tattoos. They have piercings. They wear brown shoes with black suits. It's just awful. I wouldn't put them in front of families. So I hope today in this conversation we can kind of kick some of those out, show that there's myths, and that millennials truly can be some of the most hard-working professionals that you'll have on your staff. As Lori said, we just want a why, we want a purpose. We want to blend into your company, we want to own projects, we want to have things that we head. Some of us probably expect to get a leadership role a little quicker than we should, but we all strive for something better. And there are some bad apples, but for the majority of us, as you can see with the panel I have, we're really trying to do better for the families we serve and our profession as a whole. So I think we'll have some great conversations today. I don't have a slideshow because I think this is going to be a good, open, honest conversation between us five and y'all, hopefully. So we'll just kind of kick it off with some questions and move along in that direction. So Vincent, I'm going to turn to you first. Vince, excuse me. What do you think are the top things millennials desire when they're out looking for a new employer?
Well, I think that millennials may not be too different than a lot of generations in terms of what people look for in an employer, in a work environment. I think an environment in which someone can grow, an environment in which someone can improve, the ability to enact some change, to add value, I think to be rewarded for those things. I would say that the big difference in my eyes as to what we see in the millennial generation and what millennials look for in an employer versus what others look for in an employer would be that we're having this discussion in large part due to the supply and demand of labor. So we are in some ways a very fortunate position to be able to have this voice at this time. So I would say that given the fact that directors sort of are in short supply right now, we're able to voice this, and I think that something to be fortunate for. But generally speaking, I think that most millennials want the same things as other people. Maybe it's a situation where we're not asking for it in the same way.
Yeah, and kind of for the millennial discussion right now, just kind of know that when we say millennials, I know there's a million definitions of it, but we're saying like 40 and below for this conversation, just so y'all kind of get where we're going with that. One of the things I think is important that I strive in my current work life and with my employer is a good work-life balance, and everyone has their own thought with that. Do any of y'all have a thought as to what y'all think is a good work-life balance?
Well, I can start with what is not a good work-life balance. So I don't know if this is true to all of you, but the culture that my grandfather started at our family funeral homes is just like workaholic, right? So they're all night, all the time, working 4 a.m., going to bed at 7, going on death calls all night, waking up, right back to it. That has not been very appealing to me. So the balance between what the culture that he set with kind of the way he works and the way that kind of his like top guys back in his heyday used to work was just kind of full throttle, work first over everything, and that's not what I would necessarily want to do. I think Jake he said something today earlier when they were asking him questions, and he said at some point, and kind of loosely paraphrasing, he said there was a time when he couldn't go home and turn off work. It was this all the time thing where he's kind of always thinking about it. And as I've kind of grown into managing the funeral homes and seeing how they're these like moving, active things, I have that where it's kind of an always, all the time thought process, but I still want the freedom and the availability to go do things with my wife and eventually one day with my kids. Whereas the older funeral directors in our organization didn't really do that as much. And so to answer the question pointedly, the balance that I would want is not necessarily a 9 to 5 and then nothing else, but something that gives me the ability that when it's appropriate to take time away, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I know some of y'all that have been in the profession for a long time cringe when you hear us say that we want a work-life balance because y'all put so many hours in. You know, in my short period, and I love this profession, I almost had to go a whole different direction because I'd almost burnt myself out and I'd almost kind of, my family situation was struggling, so a proper work-life balance is key to getting good people and keeping them on your staff. Any of y'all have any thoughts about that as well? I mean, do y'all have a schedule that works good for you, David, there at Bush?
Yeah, I have a really good schedule, and we're big enough where we have a team that we basically partner with folks and other arrangers and other directors, whether you're an embalmer, you partner with an embalmer, a director, you partner with a director, you know when your time off is gonna be. So we work 10 days every 2 weeks. We have a great schedule, and if you work a little extra, you know, that's not a big deal. We understand that as funeral directors, but I also know when my days are off, my kids know when to expect me and when not to expect me. And, you know, you still make that sacrifice, you still work weekends, but when you have a great team supportive culture and great handoffs, you know, you can actually train your team to do great handoffs. It's been a godsend. So it's kept me in the business. And, you know, I think too, the work ethic of funeral directors is attractive to a lot of companies now because, you know, we're willing to work weekends, we're willing to work longer than just 5 o'clock, as these guys said, you know, made us more desirable in a whole lot of other industries. And now we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot because we're looking for people to fill jobs and we don't have them, so.
That's absolutely correct. Kind of shifting gears, I kind of started the conversation earlier about the new crop of funeral directors coming out of mortuary school, and that literally is one of the biggest complaints. And I admit I've gone to mortuary schools and there's some wild ones. Probably do need to stay downstairs and not go up in front of families. But for the most part, there are people that are more tattooed and different styles, and they they're different. They're not afraid to show themselves. Do y'all have any employees that kind of are more tattooed, kind of have piercings or things like that? Or do you, what are your feelings on that, Tanner, if you take that question?
So I do. We have multiple employees that have lots of tattoos. I don't see anything wrong with them. You know, it can help you, I guess, look unique and kind of be you. But at the same time, there's still a certain reverence that we have, that we need to have with our families and with our coworkers. So with that, tattoos, they're fine. We do have them covered up. You know, shirts all the way down, pants if they need. Yeah, piercing, we try and take them out. You know, we keep simple ones, but for the most part, we're not having, you know, boogers hanging out.
I'm sure a lot of y'all have kind of faced this with your employees. I mean, there's a total shift. I mean, we have several funeral directors that if they took their jacket off, they're lit up like a Christmas tree. So it's like, I mean, we have people with tattoos on their hands, and it's a totally different world.
Zach, can I speak on that? Just
Go for it.
thought. So I feel like, you know, I recently hired a care center technician, and her only job is to not leave the care center, right? She does not need to go up front, and mainly the reason for that is she does have tattoos on the neck and in different areas. And so to my grandfather, who's well in his 70s, like just that fact alone was like, we don't need her. We don't even need that position anymore if that's it. And so what I had to explain to him was maybe back in your time when people had long hair and tattoos and stuff, maybe they really were whatever the stereotype you think is. But as it becomes more culturally acceptable to have the tattoos and the long hair or whatever that norm is or isn't in your little subcultures and your little locations, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to be great people or even not great workers. And so now it's like we can't even function when she's not there in the care center, you know, cleaning the bodies, doing the nails, and it has literally nothing to do with tattoos or anything. So just think as you're dealing with younger people who may appear differently than the standards you had 30 years ago, just think that doesn't necessarily mean that they still fall into that same stereotype.
Is there any of y'all out there that would absolutely not hire someone because of a tattoo or anything like that that was present? Wow, times have changed.
There's one.
Oh, where?
One in the back.
He said it's a slippery slope, and I couldn't hear the rest.
You can't say what kind of tattoo they can get. So once you allow it, what if someone gets a spider or something a little bit more creepy? Right? It's just going to it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, and that's a whole other conversation because a lot of the families that we're now seeing are next gen millennials too, so it's not as crazy to them. A spider, probably, but I don't know. I just think that's a good topic of conversation because that is a lot of what I'm seeing in mortuary school is people that are a bit different than the normal funeral director that comes out with a black suit, you know, crew cut, ready to go. It's just a whole different lifestyle. You know, one of the things that I also think is big is a communication of the next generation. My boss has always said I don't communicate as well. I don't know if y'all face that as well. I kind of work in my own little bubble and I don't communicate very well. I don't know if that's something that y'all cross. Are y'all good communicators? Do y'all's staff communicate well with y'all?
Sure, yeah, I'll speak to that. So I think in any successful funeral home operation, having, as Larry talked about yesterday, structured communication is a big part of it. So I'm not sure if it's a generational difference. I'm sure that there are some modes of communication that are more preferred by certain generations. I know we talk about, you know, meeting people or flexing the communication style to meet them halfway. Someone likes to communicate in a certain fashion, whether it's verbal, text, email, etc. But I think those kind of things need to be worked on from the employer's perspective and as well as the employee perspective. It's not an all or nothing proposition, but certainly certain structured communications and habits can be set up so that there's a time and a place to have a conversation, address things that are on the mind of the employee, and you know, fix things that are an issue. Have time for the employer to address those issues.
Yeah, and one of the things I've started doing a lot with the families that I see is I actually text them. And I know that sounds kind of funky as well, but I have that conversation with the family that I will be open to any method of communication. I'll phone, I'll email, I'll text, and almost 95% of them just want me to text with them. So that's how I communicate with the majority of my families, or y'all, and my coworkers. So it just seems that you can start and stop that conversation whenever you want. That's what I love about it. So.
Right. I had to make a blanket policy that if the phone call is going to take less than 30 seconds, please just text me. And that was where my older employees would just, hey, I'm going to be 15 minutes late. Okay. Hang up. Well, you know, I had to go find my phone, get it. You know, if you just text me that, I can just look or pull it out real quick. I don't have to stop everything I'm doing. So I had to sit down with everyone older than 40 and say, hey, look, if it's going to be a 30-second or less conversation, please just text me because I have to give you all of my attention for that, for a phone call. But if you text me, I can just go, oh, okay, and, you know, move on. So keep that in mind when you're calling young people. You know, just shoot them a text.
Yes, go ahead.
So I think what we have is we're obviously going to be talking about technology, and you know, for me and Zach, we kind of are 37, so we're kind of at the end of that generation of young people. And we grew up before texting even started and kind of grew up with it in our younger ages. Technology is good when it helps us keep our human relationships going. It's meant to make our lives more convenient so we can spend the time with the humans the way we want to. Texting is great. It's something that, you know, doesn't need to be over the phone and things like that. But, you know, John DeJulius, who I'm obviously a big fan of, was here and he said, when someone comes in, you know, like my son or a coworker or things like that, I take my phone and I turn it on and I put it away and I talk to them. And so, like, when we talk about communication and things like that, I think we need to change that. We all maybe stick on our cell phones too long, and he played a video, and Larry knows what I'm talking about, of The Sound of Silence from the Mac and Beats group, which is a great video. If you look it up on YouTube, The Sound of Silence by Mac and Beats, I'd recommend it. But after hearing him talk about it like he did today and things like that, just took my son to McDonald's and sat there and he wanted to go inside and we had time, so I said, yeah, let's go inside. Put my phone away, did not look at it at all. Right across from me, what is there? There's a dad. He's with his daughter. same age, the whole time he looked at his phone. And she's watching us interact and talk, and we're just talking. I have no idea what my son's saying half the time. It's something about Minecraft, I don't know. But he knows more about it than I do. But anyways, putting that away, she was looking at us, and then she was trying to copy him to get her dad's attention. I just wanted to reach over to the dad and say, hey, you got to do something about that. And so I just think about that. We need to make sure that in our industry, when we work with each other, we're putting that phone away too and giving someone the gift of our attention. There's no greater gift we can give someone than the gift of our full attention. So we need to use technology, but at the same time, not lose track of giving someone that beautiful gift of our attention. If we can do that, we're going to be a whole lot better communicators, and people are going to follow us. And if we can set that example, our staff is going to be a whole lot happier. So I love technology, but Mr. DiGiulio has really changed my mind about that. And after watching that, I've been a whole lot more focused, and it's changed my relationship with my family and probably my coworkers as well. So.
Do any of y'all who own funeral homes and so forth, do y'all think that texting your families is just too crazy? Do y'all do that? Is it too far out there? Okay.
Can I make one comment? So on that topic, I think what comes to my mind is that it's important to meet the family on the platform in which they desire to operate. So if that means they want to text, then I think it's important that the funeral entertain that. Certainly there's times when a phone call is more appropriate, but there is something to be said for meeting our consumer, meeting our families where they want to be. So comment on that.
I agree, yeah, that's why I threw that offer out at the beginning. But one of the other things that next generation millennials desire is some kind of, they like accolades, they like to be told, obviously, we're doing a good job. I mean, we don't need to be patted on the back every second of every day, but are there any things as owners of funeral homes and managers, like a perk or something like that, an award program that y'all are doing or that's beneficial for y'all that you think would be good for other people to hear? Are y'all doing anything at Bush? Any kind of compensation? Or any of y'all doing anything?
Are you asking for like the way I get compensated or the way I compensate?
Do y'all have like an employee recognition program or any kind of compensation for any kind of anything?
Well, we used to have whoever gave the least amount of discounts got an award and a gift card, because that was like a huge thing. That was like a big phase out that my dad had to deal with a lot. And we have like an opportunity plan where it's like, kind of the receivables and all that gets factored in. But for me, it's just kind of stick it out. Got a lot of people in front of me, and then when they all kind of, then I'll be compensated plenty. That's a joke.
I got it.
We do have a few things where we high-five people daily for doing something good, researcher retention, things like that. And not to give a plug for Johnson Consulting Group, but I will. They have a perfect survey score alert. So a lot of you who use that, you get that perfect survey score alert. I'll read it, I'll see who's in it, and make sure I shout out all of them. So if it's for the primary arranger, but 4 people were mentioned in that, we're gonna make sure all 4 of those people get shouted out and complimented and celebrate that victory. So just, even if it's a small thing, it's nice to celebrate those victories, because we're so easy to say, hey, something went wrong, we gotta fix it. But if you celebrate those victories, it definitely builds people up.
I mean, are any of y'all doing anything that's beneficial to your employees that you think any of us could learn or grow from? Because we're always looking for ways. The company that I'm with has 14 funeral homes, so we're always trying to find ways to make people strive a little bit more, be more creative. And so I'm just always trying to find ways to elevate that a little bit. So, yes, ma'am.
Something that we did, because again, we had multiple group talks, was personalization, and everybody gets so excited when they stage a room well. So what we started to do is we have an internal Facebook group that we've set, and people are able to share their ideas on that internal Facebook. What has helped for a lot of the newer licenses was that when they're making arrangements, they can talk about, my colleague, set the room up this way, and that family had a great experience, or they're able to visually upload a lot of those photos and communicate and share their ideas through the internal Facebook page. And that's been very well received.
Yeah, it's great. One of the things that I did was I got Jimmy Lucas, who's my boss, to give all of our employees a $100 budget to work with any family that they feel they can personalize with. So we know we have $100 that we can take and play with to personalize any service that we want. So that's been really unique, and it's really upped up the volume of personalization that we offer to our families. So just something that we do that's a little different. One of the things that next gen millennial type funeral directors is we are a little bit creative. We kind of think outside the box, almost sometimes a little too crazy. So we kind of have to reel it back in a little bit. But is there things that y'all are doing at your funeral home that are outside of the normal realm that have worked for y'all, that have helped to kind of build you up in the community that no other competition is doing?
Yes.
Go for it.
So what we've done over the last 24 months that has been super impactful, and that our competition has not become keen to yet, if that's the word, is our hospice outreach. We have a person on staff, and like one of her only jobs, she's actually like 25 or 6, so she's pretty young. Her main job is to just be at the hospice facilities, right? And one of the things that's out of the box in our market for sure is we have 2 ways that we make the hospice people just recommend us and love us more than everyone. So get there faster than all the other funeral homes. That's the number one thing, no matter what. The second thing we do is on our information sheet that we bring into the home, if applicable, on the bottom of it is like a little perforated slip. You take the hospice nurse's information. And then what we do is we give that to, her name's Marissa, our hospice. We don't really, she's our marketer, but internally call her the hospice lady. We give it to her, and she does is, depending on how it's applicable to the individual nurse, is we'll give them like a gift card for a manicure or a pedicure, just like, hey, thank you for your service, thank you for what you do in the community. Every single one's a handwritten note, and we give them anything from $25 to kind of maybe if it's, again, depending on the specific nurse, male or female, whatever. If we know them well, we know what they like they'll tell us, go, can I get you a gift card? Like they've really kind of like picked up on it, and man, it has gone so far in our hospice outreach and how they recommend us to families, kind of like wink, wink, but because we try everything we can to take care of the actual nurses that wait on the families. And so in our market, we're the only one doing that, and we've seen a lot of benefit from it. So I guess that's out of the box.
Anything else? One of the things that I had to struggle with was when I first got into a leadership role was I was very young, and there were people that were much older that worked, almost had to answer to me, and I'm sure that pissed them off to no end. But y'all guys, obviously in a leadership role, do y'all come across having to work with people that are older than you, that have been in the profession a lot longer than you, that necessarily don't like it, or do y'all have a struggle there?
I think the one thing that I learned from a good mentor early on is that you need to act in a fashion that's analogous to the role that you want to obtain. So as a funeral director, if you want to be a manager, you have to act like a manager. If you're an apprentice and you want to be a funeral director, you have to act like a funeral director. So for me, in my growth as in funeral service, and when I was working at the funeral home, I always had that in my mind, and I just acted the part that I wanted to be. And that way, the transition that I had wasn't as difficult, really. I obviously was leading funeral directors and administrators who were much older than me, but I think that there was a level of trust that was built early on, which is key, and a level of respect that was earned early on. So I think that was a key in my own career and my own example. I don't know what some of the other gentlemen could add to that or have opinions on, but I think that's very helpful for any young person who wants to grow in leadership, to really practice leadership early and practice leadership often.
I think one of the things I realized in leadership was just that from having owners who were very successful, and Mark and Jim Bush, from Mark and Jim's not here, but, they're big on serving their staff, not just leading, and they're, Northeast Ohio, everyone knows who they are. And they asked us how they can help us. They're involved. They want to, they'll get their hands dirty. Hey, you need us to do something for you. They lead by serving and being humble. And so when they asked me to do that, and every single person that I'm in charge of is like 50 years or older, and I'm 37, it was kind of scary at first, but I just made sure I got my hands dirty, make sure I served them and supported them and everything they did, and been really successful. And it was just an example of a humble servant type leadership. Not saying you don't get your hands dirty or you're not corrected or things like that when you need to be, but a whole lot more care, a whole lot more support, and it's gone a long way for me and it's gone a long way for them. So great servant leadership, I think, is one way that we can do it is if we stay humble and, don't lord it over them, but really just encourage them to take charge as well, empower them to lead. And by empowering others to lead, you really become the best kind of leader.
Tanner, you're coming on your first year in the profession, right? Kind of to the end of it.
Yep.
Is there any things that you've learned, or kind of give us a little sense as to that?
Well, yes. So this last year has been pretty crazy. I've learned a lot. Really been just kind of thrown to the wolves in the sense of just coming into this. I had no background in the industry.
Jeez, Miles.
Yeah, thanks. No, but it was good. Started back in April, kind of worked my way up through a couple different positions. Now I'm in the cemetery selling actual property. And yeah, I mean, every day I'm learning something new. You can't teach how to handle every situation with every family. So just kind of going in with a growth mindset and know that some families aren't going to like me, some are going to love me, and just grow, keep moving on.
And then Graham, you're third generation, possibly moving into a leadership role at some point. Is there anything that you've kind of learned along the way in your time as in the profession?
So I've learned so much that couldn't even talk about it all. But I'm curious to how many people in here have children that are going to be in the business, hopefully, or already are, just by a show of hands. Anyone? Okay, a couple of hands over there. Okay, so that's really not applicable at all. Yeah, learned a lot.
No, say it for those of us that have.
Okay, for the ones that do have. So my dad's more of the authoritarian figure in our business, and kind of his pep talk to the staff when I showed up was that I'm just an extension of him. So that kind of worked as far as like the immediate, everyone was like, oh my gosh, you're now listening to Grandma all of a sudden. And that wasn't it, that wasn't the way I took it at all. A lot of the people, probably the most of the people on our staff were working there before I was born and helped, because my grandpa and my mom lived in the back of the funeral home, and a lot of them helped like raise my mom. And so it's like this unique relationship where they've known me my whole life, and so that connection is a little bit deeper than just a random kid that's now telling them what to do. And a lot of it's more of like I've grown up with them and we've been on vacations together and done different things, and so there's a little bit more, it's kind of sappy, but like a little bit more love there. So the things I say carry a little more emotion. So if I'm like praising them, it kind of means more because, it's coming from me, kind of. I don't want to say like a son because it's probably not that, but like it just means a little bit more. So it's been a really easy transition for a lot of the staff to kind of have me in leadership roles just because they've known me and they're kind of proud of me in a way. And so it's not as bitter that this 20-year-old is now coming up with ideas and implementing the ideas even more so. It's more kind of like a, man, we're just glad that you're not a total reprobate kind of thing. So that's also a joke, but so it's going well. I'm learning a lot.
Kind of want to switch gears a little bit, and like I said, when I went to NFTA in Chicago, there was a ton of questions that came out of the audience. I think a lot of things that were frustrating to y'all as owners, frustrating to some millennials. And I think a lot of good conversation came out of that. So I'm going to kind of open it up a little bit to any questions that some of y'all might have or ways y'all handle maybe millennial staff that you have. Is there anyone out there that has anything that would be good for this panel to go over or chat about? Wow. They're all just working so hard for you, doing everything you want them to do.
Oh, we got one. She probably has a really great comment about what it's like to be one of you. Hang on.
So, I'm a millennial myself, and my dad here is not. We do have younger funeral directors, and the big thing, a lot of them are men, so beards are, my dad loves clean shaven faces, and a lot of our millennials do not. So I don't know how you guys control that. You guys are all men, so that would be helpful.
Well, I know at Hanson's, if you're meeting with families, you're clean shaven. That's just kind of how it is. But I know other places are different. Don't worry, you have a beautiful beard.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that. It took 27 years to grow this bad boy. It's not going anywhere.
Beards are in.
They're in, man. You know,
Beards are in.
I worked for a big funeral home in Fort Worth, and they were very by the book. We all wore a certain color suit every day with a number on it. So we all knew what suit we wore. We all knew what tie we wore. You couldn't have any facial hair. Your mustache couldn't be, past the corner of your good gosh, past the corner of your lips. So, I mean, I think times are changing. I think families don't come in and are just going to look at this guy with the beard and say, "No, I can't take him seriously." That's just my 2 cents on it. I've never had one person that I think has ever looked at me any differently because I have a beard. I mean, I love it. So
It's kind of it's kind of discretion. A lot of our old guys have like stylish mustaches. They just kind of rock the mustache thing and probably have for 30 years. So they're good. But if I try to grow a mustache, people are actually going to be off-put. So it's kind of like, can you grow a good beard or do you look like homeless? Like kind of what's the line? So it's kind of hard to make like a hard and fast rule on it. It's not in the handbook necessarily, but if you can rock a good clean mustache, rock a good mustache. That's how I feel.
You made a note or reference to the handbook. I'll give the boring answer. I think that it depends on what's in the handbook and what's addressed to the employee at the hiring. I mean, if you don't have it in your handbook, then that may be a problem. So I think it boils down to what's the policy, what's the guideline, and then is it enforced?
So the gentleman with the beards, do you have something in your handbook, like policies and?
We have a clean beard handbook where it's just like it's beards need to be trimmed. But I would just say, I enjoyed talking to you guys this weekend, and I like Zach here. And, if we were living in Michigan, we're not moving to Michigan, but if we were in Michigan, would you like to hire one of us?
Yes.
So, don't answer. I'll just put you on the spot.
These questions are coming down. Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I think things are changing so much. I mean, we've even talked about going on first calls in a polo shirt and khakis, and I know that really gets some of y'all going. Because if you don't want a beard in your facility, I'm sure that really irks you. But I know a couple funeral homes where that works. I mean, people are more comfortable with those funeral directors at 2 in the morning showing up in a polo shirt and khakis than a dark suit and so serious. So I think those are good conversation
Josh
pieces.
McQueen's presentation, if you think about those 6 personas, like who's are they gonna, you look at them, which ones are gonna, want the suit, which ones are gonna want the belt shirt, right?
Yeah.
Or the hippie dress or whatever. And any other questions? How's that really going?
Thank you. First of all, thank you to the panelists. Our 9 locations, I would say we have one of the younger average ages, and including in our management leadership team. And I would just like for everybody to reflect. I mean, this is really not a question as much as, if I may, a comment or an editorial. I think one of the things since the beginning of time is that broadly, generally speaking, whoever the older generation, like old parts like me now, have tended to downplay and to diminish whoever were the young and emerging. And my generation, I mean, good Lord, as the oldest of the baby boomers, and, right after World War II, my parents and grandparents' generation had a lot more to complain about my generation than my generation has to complain about your generation. I mean, so I think that the takeaways that we all have to have is, one, a dialogue and an openness to try our best to look at things through the lens of the other person. Now, I could qualify as an alcoholic, as a workaholic.
That guy here.
Maybe because I was off the top of it, I get confused. Maybe I should be. As I reflect back, and I love to work, and I'm in the mid-70s, and I don't need to be working 70-some hours a week. I realize that's a choice that I'm making, and that's not a choice that everybody else is going to be making. I can say this with the millennials or the young people. Honestly, if I had it to do over again, I would have worked less hard in my 20s and 30s, and early 40s, than I did. Because I think it did take a toll on the family and the relationships with them. So I think you all up there, I'd like to see a little more diversity up there next year on this panel. But you all up there are, you're onto something that is important, and it is something that we that are older have to adapt to. We have our time. That isn't just give you unlimited access, but I think that there's a time, there's a season for everything. And social acceptances of what is or is not acceptable changes and evolves over time. And I'm getting real tired of too much of the knocking of your generation over there. I don't agree with your generation, broadly speaking, politically all that much. But I think that the key for those of us, we all acknowledge that we're in a tight labor market right now. Unemployment has never been so low, at least in the last 50 years, certainly not in my lifetime, as it is right now. Finding good people is more of a challenge. We used to have an incredible bench list of people that wanted to join our firm, but we didn't have an opening. But I would take the time to interview them, get to know them, and keep in contact with them, so that when we had an opening, boom, I already had my top 3 picks to narrow from. Don't have that luxury today. But I think that it's just critical that we learn to adapt. It's just as funeral directors, we're slow to adapt to the acceptance that cremation is here and it's growing and it's going to stay. I think those of us that are older have to have that same kind of an approach towards the younger folks, the next gen that is coming up. And so what senior leadership in a firm, I think, has to really focus on is, can we attract and find the right who, and then train them properly, and either be able to select people that have passion for what it is that we do, or that have the potential to develop that passion. Because that, I think, is the differentiator in terms of your generation. I think that other generations have been more motivated for title and or money, typically not as good at team playing as your older folks' generation was not as good at team playing as you all are. And if we can find people that have or can develop the passion, I think that becomes the differentiator, other than certain states like California with just crazy labor laws that just run up the tap on everything. But I think that if you feel purpose and passion, there's a lot more flexibility in your generation than a lot of people in this room would acknowledge. And I don't need to be in the funeral business. I retired early from another career. I started as a teenager in funeral service. I went into another career, earned the money to come back in to be an owner and to build from scratch a business. And I still have that passion, and it's greater today than it was before. So, I'm sorry for rambling off. I just get upset with a lot of people that are my age.
Well, I appreciate that.
Appreciate that, Bill, and I think we need to put you on the circuit talking to people of your age. Because I can tell you, I'm around a lot, going to different conventions, statewide, national, whatever, and most of the time when I start talking about young people and talking about what you need to do to make changes nowadays, people just fold their arms and stare at me like, I've got to,
So if I could respond to Bill really quick, I won't ramble on, but just like Zach and I and Vince grew up when millennials just started. You two were probably born in the information age. We kind of grew into it. What happened was that all of that work and technology was just trying to make life easier for everyone, trying to do tasks that we didn't want to do get done easier. Just from handwriting a paper to being able to have spelling. A spell check on the computer. My teachers thought the spell check was the devil because we would never remember how to spell a word after that. And so, but all of those things, you know what I'm talking about, right? You do remember how David remembered. So all of those things we just try to make easier, not because we were lazy, but because we wanted to do things that were more important, more valuable, more relational, things like that. And so I think millennials do get a bad rap. But if you capture that part where they're willing to do something if they really want to, okay? They may not want to do the grunt work that we've all been used to doing because they've got a better thing in mind. And if they can find an easier way to do it, it's not lazy. They just know what their goals are. They've got great goals. So if you find that sweet spot for them, which is the purpose that they're looking for in their jobs that Julia's talked about, you're going to have people that are going to be loyal to you and going to love coming to work every day and probably make your life easier too. So thank you, Bill, for sharing that. But yeah, I think if you really take a look at millennials, there's a lot of good things about them that just get put off as lazy. But they're really looking for something beyond what we maybe had to run our own death certificates, driving for 4 hours, or all of that grunt work has been made easier now in a lot of ways. So just a response. Thank you, Bill.
Okay, so to tag on to Bill, I've been in business 37 years, and that's right when women in funeral service was a ginormous taboo. You think you got it bad?
I don't.
And so I say that not to bash on you guys at all, or you men, but I came here to tell you thank you and don't give up, because this industry has come, holy crap, 360. You count the women. Now this room maybe not so much, but when I go anywhere else, like our firm, holy crap, we got more women than we do men. And it's never. Yeah. So again, I say that to say, right on for you guys, and don't give up, and don't. Yeah, and Bill, thank you. You're right. Shame on us if we're pointing our fingers like, man. Maybe we all went through it too, pretty ginormously. And so, we got you guys. Really, we got you guys. Thanks.
Just to ask two questions, you can go with either area. It's 1982, 1984. Federal Trade Commission regulated our profession. The first rounds of hearings regarding the Federal Trade Commission rule will commence April 14th of this year. I think some of you weren't even born at that point in time when the rule came out. Two of you shake your heads no. Some of you were just getting out of diapers.
It came on my birthday.
Yeah. So, what do you see? Because if they took 30 plus years to look at the rule now here in 2020, they're not going to look at it for another 30 years. And you being the ones that are going to be gatekeepers of the future of funeral service, what would you want to see done to the rule? Because they are going to open it for review. There's a lot of people out there trying to say it's not going to get open for review. I don't believe that. That's one area you can speak to. The other area you can speak to, there's been much talked about the great state of Colorado that has no licensure requirements at all. And the barrier to entry, people can go hire and train talent. And they take care of getting rid of the bad apples, one way or another. There's some other states right now that are considering doing away with licensure requirements. How important was it for any one of the 5 of you to go to mortuary school to become a licensed embalmer, or a licensed funeral director, or some of you I don't even think have those esteemed alphabet soups after your name. I myself, I'm only a licensed funeral director. I never went to mortuary school. And I came into the profession in 1982, the birthplace of the Federal Trade Commission rule. So I knew nothing different. It didn't bother me of what the requirements were. So just those 2 areas. Either any one of you will want to comment on funeral rule or
I can grab the second one because in Texas, I mean, the licensing is extremely important to me, obviously. But in Texas, we just went through a whole sunset phase. I mean, Jason Harrell in the back knows he was a big part of keeping Texas licenses alive. The Funeral Service Commission almost got sunsetted, and pretty much our license would have been null and void, and any Joe off the street could have came in and did what we do for less money probably. And it was, we almost kind of thought for a minute that it was going to be the end of Texas licensing, and we were going to be put in with the hairdressers and everyone else. So I think it's extremely important, and I'll continue to serve Texas Funeral Director Association in the capacity of making sure that licenses are always relevant in Texas. And it's just sad to see that there are other states that are considering throwing it under a scope of, you know, plumbers and so forth and so on. It's just, it's sad. So we fought it in Texas and we won for another 12 years. So it's important to me, even as a millennial, I'm big on that.
Well, I'm very proud of my mortuary science license. I'm an embalmer, I'm a funeral director. And I held the opinion for a long time that licensing requirements should be extremely high and hard, because I was proud of that. But I think what we're experiencing now in funeral service, given the supply of labor, is that we need to take a closer look at that. I think there's a lot of talent in hospitality areas. There are young people with social skills that can do a lot of good in an arrangement room and take care of a lot of good families. So I think that I've changed my own views on that, and I think that you know, every state's going to have to address it on their own, but I think that something that I would support is changing some of the licensing requirements going forward.
So I'm not licensed. I'm currently an intern. So in Louisiana, you can just like work for X amount of hours and then take a test. But as someone who runs a business from that lens, I want barrier to entry to be as high as possible. So if you had to get a doctor to be a funeral director, that would help me keep other funeral homes from opening up and just getting any old guy off the street. So I am a proponent of licensing and high qualifications at that. In Louisiana right now, there's a bill trying to get pushed through that would create a funeral assistant. Is anybody familiar with that? It's basically like half a funeral director. I don't really know any other better way to put it, but it's like you do half the things, but you kind of get this license and you can be the one guy on a funeral and blah, blah, blah. And my personal opinion, not speaking on behalf of the company necessarily, but my personal opinion is that might be beneficial for the like rural areas in our state, which there's a lot of them, that it is really hard to get qualified, licensed work there. But as far as a kind of a city dweller, and a big funeral home at that, I want the barrier to entry to be high. So I'm for licensing, and eventually I will become a licensed funeral director myself. So,
well, I don't have mine. I'm not licensed, but I do see the necessity of the license and going through, and you know, especially for embalming. But I do know we have a couple funeral arrangers, not directors, so they don't have the license for that. But they're great with people, they love people, and they have that empathy that is needed in an arrangement room. So I don't think that not everyone would need a funeral director's license for that.
So I'm not going to throw this directly back at you, Mark, but I think to all owners, you know, I'm going to challenge you. And that is making it easier to become a funeral director. Are we gonna be paying for less quality? And I don't think that's the answer, so I think, everyone's kind of in agreement with that. But if you're struggling to find a workforce, is it an industry problem? Is it the licensure? Are we gonna blame the licensure? Or are we gonna, as John Julius would say, own it? And I would challenge all of us to own it. Do we, that guy who lived above the funeral home that died at 90 shoveling your driveway for minimum wage and was, you threw a big funeral for him, doesn't exist anymore. Those folks are gone. So I think we need to really take a look at, we're not attracting people because the type of person that would fit in a funeral director role can do better elsewhere because of that work ethic and because of their abilities. So I really admire those people who do have a license because their ethics to work, their ethics to be good to people, their care for society is an attractive feature that more than just the funeral industry are looking for. So I would challenge all owners and all managers to say, hey, maybe we need to take a look at our culture, our benefits, our purpose here, how we're turning people into leaders, or are we just trying to be a manager, or are we trying to be a leader who encourages other people to lead? So I would take a look inward and become the best place someone would want to work and feel good about themselves. So that would be my challenge to all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues, I think with Vince, there is some things that definitely could change in the licensing requirements, but I think one of the biggest problems that I see is the mortuary schools and what they teach students. Really, they're just teaching them to pass a test, rather than teaching them how to properly arrange with families, how to learn a financial piece. Most people of my age probably could not look at a balance sheet or a financial statement and accurately read it, and that's a problem. Because you can't properly manage the business unless you can do that piece of it. I think that's where mortuary schools fail. Is that they don't properly teach people how to be a funeral director. You have to learn that on the back end. So that's just my 2 cents, that should definitely have some changes.
I just want to add a note to that, because Zach, you had introduced me to Lele, who's actually the program director at Washington College. Someone that I really, really wanted to be on this panel. She really wanted to be here, and she was trying to, find a way to do that. Unfortunately, they have graduation today. So she literally was going to fly in yesterday just to do a presentation on race statistics. I think somewhere with 70% female coming out of the colleges, and she has a lot of data on that. And so I'm going to give a pitch for next year, because we're definitely bringing her in next year.
She's great.
and to just tag on the comment, Bill, I absolutely agree. I'll let you know that I did reach out to a pretty good group of women. I think maybe they're all holding the forts down everywhere. So we would love to have had a more diverse panel, note taken for sure. But I think it's a great conversation too. Zach, there's a great point about, is it really the programming at the colleges that need to change when you think about licensing? The barrier to have a license across states, I think there's a real significant importance to that. But what is the license teaching us? What is it? What are the qualifications? What are you getting out of that? Because I agree that hospitality industry is absolutely a place that I want to be hiring people, thinking about what people's needs are these days. And by the way, I had a really good tip the other day. Someone said, for part-timers, look for bartenders, because they're really good and they work really crazy hours and they're great with talking to anybody, right? I'm gonna shout out for that. Any other questions for this panel? Or comments? All right, well, let's
Got off
give them a
easy
round.
today.
Yeah, great.